Hey guys, Tisha here, and we are back. Sorry, the camera's like, we are back with another Counting the Cost chapter to read. I guess I was combining review and read. We're back with another chapter. Read, y'all. If I'm already starting off like this is gonna be interesting to see. Okay. Chapter 2, a window of opportunity that God has given us, and other half truths. When Josh went away, wait a second. When Josh went away, we didn't talk much. So we went from the first chapter, for those of you who were not here for the first reading, go back and listen. But we went from the first chapter being told that Josh has confessed about some stuff and he's done. Can we talk about it? To when Josh went away, we didn't talk much. Okay, so obviously already there's a problem with this because we know now what some of the accusations and findings have been about Josh. And here we are saying that when Josh went away, we didn't talk much. The subject of whatever had happened with Josh wasn't embargoed and it wasn't off limits. I don't know if I said that word correctly. So embargoed. I have to look it up because I don't know what it means. It just that it wasn't something that I wanted to talk about, so there wasn't much to say. Mom and Pops gave us the bare details about Josh, and so all I really knew was that he'd been sent away with some friends and that he would be working construction, and then that would hopefully oh my God, I'm butchering this, y'all. Let me start over. Mom and Pops gave us the bare details about Josh, and so all I really knew was that he'd been sent away to stay with some of their friends, that he would be working construction, and that hopefully it wouldn't be long before he would return to us. That was all. I was happy to move on and put it all behind me. So their answer to what they were told was to send their child away to do construction. I hope, no, I didn't even say I hope. You said it right there, to send him away to do construction. So he didn't go see anybody to get any form of counseling. He wasn't truly reprimanded for what he did. They just sent him away and didn't really deal with the situation. As well as Nike and all the other useful phrases that guided our steps, we had grown up becoming constantly reminded not to stir up contention among the brethren. It was a way for our parents to keep us siblings from talking badly about each other. That's also a way to keep things hidden or putting anyone down. But over time, it became something else, something more sinister, of course, because if they're not supposed to stir up things, then that means that they're not supposed to discuss certain things, which means that things that are problematic within their family may not be addressed because they're using this out of context. Because the Bible also says that if you have an issue with someone, you're supposed to be able to bring it to them. And if it can't be resolved, you're supposed to bring in another party. So you got to watch how you use some of these things. I can tell already I'm going to be annoyed with this chapter. By preventing us from discussing anything controversial or sensitive with each other, the instruction not to stir up contention among the brethren became a tool for silence, control, for guilt. I agree. Despite being vague about Josh, my parents rarely missed an opportunity to involve us in other areas of life. Whenever there was work to be done around the house, from daily chores to maintenance and yard work, we would all be given a task, some tools, and a clear set of instructions. Josh and John had both learned to drive before they turned 12, and I'm going to guess that she learned how to do something around the house. That's going to be my guess because this is how this goes. And by the time I was the same age, I could teach my little sister to read, change diapers, babysit for short periods of time, and fix a meal for the entire family as well as any adult. The motherly things. I was about to go on a tangent about that. I can say that I was taught some of those same things as far as household things, but I also was taught to do things outside of the house as well. I get it. I understand the time period. I understand that there are far more many homes that are probably traditional, especially when it comes to religious things, than there are not. But I don't agree with it. It was no different when it came to Pop's political ambitions. When he ran for state representative, we became his campaign staff. He mobilized the army of Duggars and drove us around northwest Arkansas. I always say it wrong. Setting out lawn signs and handing out leaflets at events. We get Wendy's on the way home. And even when the days were long and the waiting was longer, it was good to be involved, especially when he won an initial term and then re-election. As kids, we had a purpose. We were stuck in a classroom exposed to all the perils of public school. We were out in the real world helping mom and pops serve the God within it. The sense of purpose grew even greater the moment Pops told us that he had decided to run against the incumbent for the Republican nomination to the U.S. Senate. Election to the United States Senate has never been something I've ever sought. It's not me that wants to run, he explained one day, but I really feel like God wants me to do this. I've prayed about it and have done something that only I do for the most important decisions ever. I'm going to assume here that this decision that he says that he was led by God to do is what led to them getting pictured, which is what led to Discovery and them being interested in the family at all. So this was kind of like the trajectory of them being able to get their message out there as well as receive income for their family. That's my assumption. And an important decision, I'm going to say that maybe he fasted for a long period of time. Let's see. One of my siblings asked the question, which is what we were all thinking. What, Pops? I flipped a coin 3 times, he said. I just did this whole spiel about him fasting and praying, and he flipped a coin. Sorry, y'all. I did that whole spiel, and he fasted. He fasted and he prayed, and he really prayed and he prayed. No, he flipped a coin. Okay. He said his eyes growing wider and smiled of amazement from on his mouth, and all 3 times it landed on head. So I said, okay, God, you want me to run, so I'll run. I still can't believe it. I was nearly 11 years old at the time, and I knew little of politics or challenge of running against an incumbent, but I did know that senators and their families lived in Washington, D.C. I didn't much like the idea of leaving Arkansas as the friends we had around us, but I also knew that sacrifice was an essential part of serving God. Ministry sometimes requires sacrifice, Mom and Pops would say often before going on to quote Psalms 34:19. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivereth from him out of them all. I hate when people use scripture as a means for their agenda. That's all I'm going to say on that. So we traveled the whole state, setting out yard signs, handing out our leaflets, and eating Wendy's on the way home. The days and the distances covered were way longer than Pop's previous state campaigns, and the sacrifice felt real. And when primary polling day came around, and we all dressed in our matching outfits and accompanied Pops to the polling place, where a handful of journalists had gathered to tell the story, I was just sure that a God-given victory was just around the corner. I was wrong. Pops lost. His response was calm and measured. He reminded us that God has never told him we would win, just that he was supposed to run. He was satisfied that he had obeyed God's call, and I respected him for that. I also think us kids were a little relieved not to have to move to DC for several years. But the loss was not the end of the story. In fact, it was really just the beginning of everything. One of those journalists who had interviewed Pops at the polling place was from the New York Times. He'd written about this crazy Christian guy with a bunch of kids who had failed at the ballot box. The story had made it into print alongside a photo of my parents and all 15 of us Duggars lined up in a row, walking into the polling place, smiling cheerfully at the camera in our homemade matching outfits, which is the picture that got them where they are. A week or two later, Pops got a call from a magazine that wanted to know more about our family and run a feature about us. Pops wasn't sure at first, and he told them about our family and that it was going through a difficult time with their eldest son being temporarily gone and all. I don't understand how that's a difficult time. So that being mentioned alone would have made me wanted to look into that, but they didn't. But he and Mom prayed about it, then told the rest of us that he wanted us all to pray and see if we felt that God was opening up a new opportunity for our family. We did what we'd been asked to do, and we all dutifully agreed that this was something God wanted us to do. Not that we had much choice in the matter. After the feature came out, complete with a photo shoot with all of us, minus Josh, out in a field somewhere, surrounded by hay bales, Pops played a message on our answering machine from a man who said he was from Discovery Health and that he wanted to make a one-time documentary about our family. Pops was skeptical. "I don't want you to make us out to be freaks," he said when he called the guy back. I didn't hear the other end of the conversation, but as I listened, and for a long time after the conversation, Pop looked serious. He looked like he did whenever he was listening hard to what Mr. Gothard or one of the other lawmakers in the state House of Representatives. "You know," Pop said to all of us later at Bible time, "when I ran for Senate, I didn't see God's ultimate purpose in it. But with the article and now this TV documentary, I'm beginning to see that God has something bigger and better in store for us. This is a window of opportunity that God has given us to show people what a Christian family can look like. This is our chance to share with the world that children really are a blessing from the Lord." I didn't know it at the time, none of us did, but that phrase, a window of opportunity, would become a familiar thing in the Duggar house as the cries of a newborn baby or the call of a director for there to be quiet on the set. Mom and Pops would repeat those 5 words often, and just like the call of Nike, a window of opportunity became part of our family shorthand. It was an instant explanation of the reasons why certain choices were made, a reminder of the blessings received and the sacrifices that all of us make in return. Goodness gracious. But with every passing season and every change that would follow, the meaning of those 5 words would alter. In time, whenever I would hear anyone talk about how that first decision to bring the TV cameras into our home was a window of opportunity, all I would think about was secrets and lies. I was grating cheese when the film crew showed up. "Just act normal," I was told by a man with an earring as a camera loomed in front of my face and a woman wearing pants started instructing everyone in my family what to do. Now, take into account that she's talking about this man with the earring because it's probably something that her religion doesn't agree with, and this woman with pants because we know earlier chapter that it was said that they're not supposed to wear the clothes of a man, even though, as I pointed out, back in those times, men and women were wearing the same clothes. I was 12 now. A mess of self-conscious nerves and red-faced awkwardness. Acting normal was not an option. I tried to relax, digging out my best sweet Jilly muffin smile for the viewers. "Look over there, sweetie. Don't look at the camera." It wasn't easy acting natural, especially when they had us all lined up in our PJs outside the bathroom door. They wanted to show the viewers that we all shared 2 bathrooms in the house, but it left me feeling embarrassed, uncomfortable, and a little unsafe. Not that I could express any of that to my parents. This was a God-given window of opportunity after all. The best thing I could do was bury my feelings. It wasn't all bad. At one point, the woman wearing pants announced that the TV crew was going to follow us to the store for groceries. As we pushed our 5 shopping carts around Aldi, I heard a whisper that the crew was going to be paying for everything. Oh, yeah. I would have been like, boom, boom. So for the first time ever, Mom wasn't directing us to buy our usual stocks of canned beans, ramen noodles, and 48-cent frozen beef and bean burritos. Instead, we were allowed to fill our carts with boxes of Lucky Charms and honeycomb cereals, ice cream sandwiches, frozen pizzas, and all beef chimichangas. Our carts were heavier than ever before, and all of us Duggar kids had the same double wide smile fixed on our faces. For once, the week ahead wasn't going to be filled with tater tot casserole or bean sandwiches. Oh, goodness. The TV crew visited us for 2 or 3 days that first time, then returned for another few days every 2 or 3 months. It was a long, slow process, and it got so that we hardly noticed them when they were with us and missed them when they left, and our weekly menu returned to its usual staples of beans, tuna, and macaroni. By the time 14 children and pregnant again was complete, Josh had returned to live with us. His head had been shaved, I guess in an attempt to punish him or instill some humility. I wasn't worried about him, though. I was a kid, and I trusted that things would get better now that Josh had been fixed. And yes, she has it in quotes. Besides, it felt right to be complete as a family again, especially as Mom had been giving birth to Jackson, the 15th Duggar child. Pregnancy wasn't easy for Mom, especially in the first trimester with nausea because it was bad, but we loved the excitement that surrounded a new baby. To have another sibling to love on, to care for, made me deeply happy. For a while, the baby eclipsed the filming. We had been sent a DVD to approve the 45-minute documentary, but still didn't have TV in the house. So by the time the show aired, I started to forget about it a little. That didn't last long. 14 children and pregnant again went on to become the #1 show on Discovery Health at the time. Pops was ecstatic. We prayed about it as a family, said Pops at Bible time one night, his eyes dancing with excitement. We felt like God was wanting us to share with the world the message that children are a blessing from the Lord, and now it's the #1 show on the channel. God is blessing this. God is using us to share his message with the world. From that moment on, we didn't just talk about a window of opportunity. Now we had a new name for what we were doing. It was our ministry. Duggar family at Old Johnston Roadhouse. Can y'all see? I wish these weren't black and white, but it probably made the book cheaper. Duggar family in front of the big house while it was still under construction. The Duggar family kept on growing, and by the time Mom gave birth to Johanna, her 16th, the TV crews were regular visitors to our little home surrounded by the cow pastures. It was getting crowded in there with only 2 bathrooms and 3 bedrooms. Goodness gracious, that ain't right. That is not right. All those kids in 2 bedrooms because the parents had 1. So Pops bought some land over near I don't know this word. Tontitown, Tontitown, and started the long process of building us a brand new 7,000 square foot steel framed home. I was too young to even begin to wonder where the money came from and was just happy at the prospect of a little more space at home. We moved into a rental while the new house was being built, and in true Duggar style, we did as much of the work as we could, laying the radiant heating flooring, tiling the floors, and a whole more besides. But even though we were able to dedicate plenty of time to the project, our workforce was big, the house was bigger. A build which we hoped would be ready in a year was still in progress when Mom announced that she was pregnant with her 17th baby. Goodness gracious. All she did was procreate. I know her body. Ugh. The arrival of another Duggar meant we had ourselves a deadline. But our growing number wasn't the only reason to hurry up our work. A second documentary has showed us starting the work on the house, but the producers wanted the 3rd Duggar TV special to feature us actually completing the work and finally moving in. Thanks to some good negotiation from Pops, the network agreed to get out the checkbook. So they got that house because of the network. I don't blame them. If we've been excited about filming our shopping carts with free honeycomb cereal, frozen pizzas, and chimichangas, this was a whole nother level. A crew of workers turned up to the site, and the producers flew in and an interior designer from New York. She helped us pick out the kind of bedroom sets and other furniture that we would never have been able to afford. Wow. There was still a ton of work for us to do, but seeing the big house, as we called it, springing toward the finish line like that made all the long hours worthwhile. I said sprinting. I don't know when I first heard Pops describing us as a filming family, but it made sense to me. We studied as a family, we worked as a family, we did everything as a family. Neither Pops nor Mom had hobbies outside of us, and I was thankful for that. They were devoted to each other and devoted to us. We were an everything family, so why not let the cameras come in and show the world? There was a fourth documentary which followed us on a road trip, and then a fifth which covered the birth of Jennifer, the 17th Duggar kid. As a filming family, we were opening our home and letting the world come on in and take a look. By this point, I was 16 and no longer blushing every time the camera came near me. The crew was almost becoming part of the family, and I was willing to take whatever direction I was given. This was our window of opportunity. This was our ministry. So when Mom and Pops told us that the network, TLC, wanted to move on from one-off documentaries and start making an actual reality show about us, I wasn't blown away with surprise. It was just another confirmation of the fact that this whole thing was a God-ordained opportunity. To my mind, at least, it had nothing to do with us wanting to be famous or see ourselves on TV. After all, we still didn't even have a TV in the house, and we would only watch the rough cuts of each documentary when they were sent over on DVD. I was vaguely aware of when the shows were being broadcast, and strangers might say something nice to us from time to time of what they've seen of us on TV, but when Pops asked us to pray about whether we should say yes to TLC's offer, the prospect of becoming famous was the last thing on my mind, especially when Pops explained the conditions that he'd made with the network. I told them that the faith is the core of our lives, so they cannot edit out our faith. They said it's our story and that we can tell it however we want. In the world of the IBLP, it was never okay to say you were proud of anything or anyone, no matter how godly the person or the righteous decision. But even though I knew Proverbs 11:2 and 16:8 by heart, when pride cometh, then cometh shame, and pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before downfall, I was kind of proud of Pops for telling TLC that our faith was non-negotiable. I believed in what we were doing and prayed that God would give my parents the guidance they needed as they negotiated. They're calling it 17 Kids and Counting, he announced one day, letting the words hang in the air a little as we heard the title for the first time. This is a ministry opportunity that God has brought to us. If it were over tomorrow, we would be happy. I looked around at my siblings. Nobody disagreed. It seemed to me as though we were of one mind, united. We trusted Mom and Pops completely. Whatever happened with the show, however long it lasted, I was convinced that it could only ever be a good thing. I was 16 when the individual documentaries turned into a reality show series, and I was old enough to notice the different demands that it placed on our family. The first 5 documentaries had been filmed over a period of almost 3 years, but we shot the whole first season of 17 Kids and Counting, all 10 episodes in a few months. The crew would come 3 days each week, filming 3 hours in the morning and then another couple in the afternoon or evening. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, depending on the week. Once all the Duggar family content had been shot, we'd have a series of interview days in a local studio where we'd narrate the show. It ran like this for weeks on end, and homeschooling was often interrupted so that we could get out of the house and film something fresh and new for the show, like taking a trip to New York City for sightseeing or driving up to Ohio for a family reunion. These experiences were exciting, opening the world to us. Nobody complained, and I guess we just accepted it when Bible times didn't only include praying and reading the Bible together, but also became more extensive briefing times, with Pops and Mom reminding us of the upcoming field commitments, as well as cautioning us to not tell other people about what we were doing. We're filming a family now, so we had to take it serious. We were a filming family now, so we had to take it serious. Aside from the filming trips, the new school marked the return of old perks we'd enjoyed when 14 Children and Pregnant Again was shot. If we went to Aldi in the weeks we were filming, our carts would be filled without us worrying about the price. On days that the crew was with us, they would order food from wherever we wanted. Pops gave us older kids a debit card so that if we were running on errands or hauling the younger ones to a music lesson or a dental appointment and it was getting late in the day, we could grab food out on the way home and give him the receipts. It was a whole lot better than how it used to be, with us driving around with a crock pot full of chili, feeding the little ones on the run. I halfway wish that we saw that. I halfway wish that they showed us things like that with them, how they saved and things of that nature on 17 and Counting more than they did of them having these full-on meals, because the reality was with this family benefited from this production, and before they were not eating certain things and they were not being exposed to certain things. We were already deep into filming the second season when the first one aired. Just like with the documentaries, we didn't always watch them live, but we had carefully checked over the various rough cuts that had been sent over to us. Just like Pops had told them, they hadn't edited out our references to our faith, and when the show aired, I was excited at the thought of all those people across America watching and getting to see Christian values lived out on a secular television channel and maybe inspiring them to live for Christ. It wasn't just random strangers who were watching us taking note of how we lived. One day, we were told that we were soon going to host a special visitor for lunch. A delegation of IBLP leaders from Ramona was visiting the U.S., traveling with several of the main leaders, including Mr. Gothard himself. They were going to be in the neighborhood, and they were going to visit us for lunch. They weren't going to be in the neighborhood. They all came out there because they wanted to take advantage of these people being on TV. The excitement was instant, but then came the challenge. The Romanian delegation totaled about 50 people, and they were almost as many U.S. IBLP leaders accompanying them. The big house had 2 kitchens, one regular size and the other a full commercial one with an industrial washer and super wide ovens. So we had the capacity to cook for large numbers, but not the pans required to prepare lunch for almost 100 people. Who was giving them this money for this? Mom put out a call to her friends from church, and a small army of wives and some of their kids descended to help clean, cook, and prepare for this epic event. There was no filming that day, but even if the crew had been there, I doubt we would have noticed them. When we heard the buses turn off the road and rolled down our gravel driveway, we all took our places out front. We rehearsed our family greeting a couple of times and lined up in age order, ready to extend a hand as we put on our brightest IBLP smiles and introduced ourselves. Man, y'all had to practice how to introduce yourselves. We sometimes practice this at Bible time over the years, especially for the newest younger kids to learn the drill, and it had always gone well. With the Romanians, however, we hit a little turbulence. Both the men and women among them didn't just want to shake our hands. They greeted every single one of us with a kiss on each side of our faces. Aside from the occasional handshakes and side hugs at church, or when we've been examined by a dentist, or an occasional visit to the doctors when we were sick, kids in the Duggar family weren't supposed to have much physical contact with the opposite gender. But even though the greeting line lasted forever and was awkward, all of us older kids were blushing. We accepted it as a cultural difference. Besides, the presence of Mr. Gothard was enough to push my embarrassment to the background. I wasn't surprised by how short he was. I'd seen him up close before, but I'd never seen him outside of a conference, especially not in our home. Having Mr. Gothard visit us at the big house was a huge deal. In my opinion, having such a man of God visit our home was more impressive than being greeted by a fan in an airport, and even more impressive than a visit by the president himself. Do they not talk about idols in their faith? Because it very much seems like this man is being idolized by the people of this community. Mr. Gothard was different from a boisterous politician, but also very similar with his charm. A little over 70 years old, with black dyed hair, a round face, and a wide smile. I'm not saying ill to him being 70 years old, y'all. I'm saying ill to the fact that this man, because I remember seeing clips of him, and I just, even in reading his name, it irks me. Let me go back to it. He had a twinkle in his eye as he looked straight at each person he addressed. His voice was soft with a strong northern accent, and he gave each of us a firm handshake as he slowly moved down the line. Excuse me. I just try to cover up that I yawned. Sorry, I pass it on sometimes. So I was like, maybe if I do like this. Watching him come closer, greeting my parents first, then my youngest siblings, I could feel the nerves mounting within me. When it was finally my turn, I thrust my hand out and blurted out the words I had been rehearsing for days. If it weren't for you, Mr. Gothard, I likely wouldn't be here. What? Did her parents tell her to rehearse that? Or did she come up with that on her own? I'm thinking that maybe her parents said to rehearse that, because why out of all things would that be what she said? If it weren't for you, I likely wouldn't be here. No, if it wasn't for the person that you all pray to the being that you pray to the being that you believe in, you wouldn't be here. It don't got nothing to do with a little bald head. He looked intrigued, his smile growing even wider. I stammered on. My parents have always told me that they would have stopped having children after they had twins, numbers 2 and 3. I'm number 4, so thank you for teaching them that children really are a blessing from the Lord. Oh, my goodness. Oh, these children were so programmed. Oh, goodness. I don't remember what he said in reply, but I know what I felt. And it wasn't embarrassment or awkwardness. In my eyes and the eyes of everyone I knew, Mr. Gothard was a legend, a man who we all looked up to. To have his attention on me for just a few seconds was enough to leave me feeling on top of the world. As sweet Jilly Muffin, approval hunter, it was the moment that I would treasure for the rest of my life. The Duggars' favorite lunch of tater tot casserole and green beans from a cookbook written must have been a success, because from then on we found ourselves invited to a whole bunch of IBLP events. Sometimes my parents would be invited to speak, and occasionally we got free lodging and entry into the kids' activities that we previously hadn't been able to afford. We were starting to become a model family. Along with some of my sisters, I was invited to attend one of their camps called Journey to the Heart Up in Michigan, where we were invited to serve as leaders, which was a great honor that I hadn't expected at all. Even more surprising, though, was that the fact that after camp, my eldest sister, Jenna, was personally invited by Mr. Gothard to visit the IBLP headquarters in Chicago and work there for a while. We were new to the inner workings of the IBLP, but we knew enough already to understand why it was only Jenna, I hope I'm saying her name right, Jana, or is it Jana, who was invited. She was the only elder Duggar girl who was blonde, and everybody knew that Mr. Gothard liked blonde girls. That's so cringy. Everybody knew that he liked blonde girls. That's so cringy. We joke about calling her one of Gothar's girls. It didn't occur to me at all how strange, unsafe, and unwise it was. Right, which is why I just said that's so cringy. Ugh. And if it had, I doubt I would have been able to speak out against it. Sweet Jilly Muffin had grown up, but I was still terrified of conflict and would do anything I could to avoid it. I was 16 the day some of the families from church had come over to the big house. It was one of those hot summer afternoons when it was impossible to stop sweating, especially when we were all wearing full-length skirts. I'd outgrown wearing the platoons a few years earlier when I stopped climbing trees, and I learned to keep my skirt down at all times, but I felt bad that some of the little kids were getting kind of cranky in the heat. So I got permission from my parents to set up a water balloon fight. It was fun, and everyone was having a good time, shrieking and yelling out as we chased each other across the grass. But then a voice I didn't recognize yelled out, "Stop, what are you doing?" I froze, a large tub of water balloons heavy in my hands. I turned to see one of the dad's red face with more than just the heat. He was enraged that his kids would be playing like this without his permission, and the veins were popping above the buttoned-up collar of his shirt. He was yelling at the top of his voice, gesturing for his 13 kids to immediately run towards him. They all obeyed instantly. "Who gave you permission to do this? Answer me. Who allowed this?" Nobody answered, and he kept yelling. In the chaos, I slipped away, ran to the end of the house that was furthest away, and locked myself in the bathroom. It must have taken me 10 or 20 minutes for my heart rate to go back to normal, and another hour at least before I was brave enough to unlock the door. I guess I inherited my avoidance of conflict from Mom. I doubt it was from Pops. When the show was just beginning and we were acclimating ourselves to our new life as a filming family, something wholly unexpected happened, something that made Pops upset in ways I'd never seen before. It started with a letter. Way back before Josh had been sent away, around the time we left the church that had allowed immodest dancing at its Christmas service, Josh had been courting a girl. He must have confessed to her vaguely about the abuse that he had committed, because I heard later that the girl had written a letter to him expressing her anger at what he had done. But instead of sending it to him, she tucked it away in a book. 4 years later, in 2006, the book was loaned to a friend at the church and the letter resurfaced. It was read by someone who knew us, someone who attended the same church as us. Instead of talking with Mom and Pops, she got more information from church leadership. Okay, so you're not supposed to stir up stuff around your brethren, but you hear this message and you don't come to them. Instead, you go and you stir up stuff around everybody and you tell them what you heard. Not that I blame her for bringing it, because it should have been talked about, but the way that it was done, She phoned a hotline and informed DHS about what she thought was an potential abusive situation. Okay, I'm not mad at this at all. Everything changed when we were in Chicago to record with Oprah and then attended our first IBLP headquarters Christmas party. Pops received a call notifying him of an investigation. As soon as the trip was over, myself, most of my sisters, and my parents all had been interviewed. We attended a closed court session. People, strangers, would come to our house at random times to make sure there were locks on the doors and that everybody was sleeping where they were supposed to be sleeping. It was terrifying. I was frightened that I was going to say the wrong thing and that someone was going to take us away from Mom and Pops. One wrong word, one bad answer, and I'll be the one who tears our family apart. That's sad, because more than likely they would have removed him from the home rather than your parents. I tried not to let my fear show. I tried to bury it deep inside, but I was older now and there was more at stake. It didn't just affect me, it affected all of us. So it was harder to bury the fear caused by the investigation than the fear caused by the abuse that DHS was looking into. Right, because they were doing their job. They were trying to make sure that the children were safe, but because of everything she had been taught, she was afraid that they were going to be ripped apart. Mom and Pops took time to sit with us all, to pray with us, and to explain as best as they could what was going on. I appreciated it, especially their advice. Just tell the truth. Oh, okay, so they were encouraged to tell the truth. They both said many times, it's a safe place and they're just doing their job. Tell the truth and everything will work out fine. I was bound up tight in my own fear, but not so tight that I didn't notice the way that Pops was feeling too. He was angry. I had heard that the person who found the letter and phoned the hotline had also talked with a few other people in our church. While the details remain private, the story of my brother having problems spread throughout our small home church. Some families treated us kindly with compassion, but I believe others were jealous of our success when the television show treated us with such suspicion. They threw us to the wolves. Pop said when the investigation concluded, they did not stick up for us at all. They're the ones who made this happen. Okay, I find problem with the fact that he's more upset about them making an investigation happen to make sure that the children were okay than the fact that his son did what his son did. They're the ones who allowed DHS to investigate our family, even though we had already taken care of it. But had they really taken care of it? Or had they just pushed it away for a little while for it to come back? Because for all we know, those kids could still have been being mishandled inappropriately by their brother. The fallout was immense. We didn't know who we could trust, who was for us or against us. We pulled back from the church, no longer allowing them to host services at the big house. It created a deep divide within our church, and in time, inevitably, I guess the church split. Like Pops, I was hurt and angry. But when it was all over, all I wanted to do was put it behind me. I had been terrified of losing my family and traumatized by the questions I had been forced to answer. I wanted to forget all about it. I wanted to move on from the whole thing as fast and as far away as possible. I want to know what came of that situation. I want to know if they even told the truth of the situation. I also feel like for the father to be more upset with the person who disclosed the information is ridiculous to me and shows how much they've enabled this person. They've enabled their son to become the predator that he is. And this is one of the problems that come with some families. And please understand, I'm very much so including my family in this without telling all my business. I have seen generation to generation where things have come out about what was done to various members of the family, and it is an ongoing thing. So here we are, and we know that this was done. And rather than sitting down and addressing it and having a full-on discussion, rather than allowing whoever the young ladies were that their brother did things to, rather than doing it in a form where you speak one-on-one with them and you also get them help and things like that, because we didn't hear about them getting help. We heard about them just sending the son away. What is being done to rectify the situation to make sure that it doesn't happen again to the next child? Because if you continue to keep it a secret, then it continues to just go on from person to person. I've said this before in another video that I found it extremely hard when something was done to me, when an act of violence was committed to me, to find out that the same thing had happened to my mother and it happened to her mother. Why is it that when different acts are happening, and I'm not just talking about SA, I'm talking about DV and all these things, these other things. Why is it that people are told not to speak out against it? Because what you're doing is you're giving the predator power to continue to do what they're doing. And you're continuing to sometimes make the victims feel guilty for what has been done to them. And as a result, you build these individuals who feel like they can just pick through the family, and you build their victims who are forever changed because of what has been done to them. This chapter was better than the first? You all, let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Do you think that Bill, their father, because I can't remember, Jim Bob, I don't remember what his name is. Do you think that their father had a reason to be upset with how the situation was revealed to DHS? Let me know your thoughts down below. Until next time.